Got it. Welcome, everybody. The first thing that I would have as an announcement is Ed DeQuintrall sent me a note last night. He is having shoulder replacement surgery tomorrow if he passes his blood test. I know you can make jokes about that. But anyway, so he's getting blood work done this morning in hope that the platelets are high enough that he can go on with the surgery. So when we end with the Lord's Prayer, let's think about and pray for Ed for, first of all, getting his surgery, and second of all, having it be successful with him. The other thing that Ed, did you talk about in some of the past meetings about a timeline for getting together from the surveys they're going to the church and stuff?
Yeah, groups are going to be starting sometime in April, but we haven't come up with a definite criteria yet.
Okay.
So possibly May.
Okay.
Maybe later part of April.
Just curious what the most recent is.
Yeah, we haven't met yet since they sent that survey out. Hopefully everybody will respond to that survey that was sent out.
Well, we're in Holy Week now, so
yeah,
it's busy time.
Not a whole lot happening this week as far as background stuff.
Right. Okay.
Other than the narthex is almost done.
Good.
They're painting today.
Okay.
Say, Rob, unless I did something different than what you're talking about, the survey I completed was like 2, possibly 3 questions. It took me less than 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Ed, do you have an opening for us?
Well, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this, the medical description of the crucifixion. It's pretty gruesome, and I tried to cut out all the stuff, but if you want to hear it, I'll read it to you. If you don't, I won't. So, I mean, is anybody interested in hearing from a physician's medical point of view what happens to your body during the crucifixion?
Sure.
It's pretty gruesome, but it's what our Lord went through. So, all right. A man to be flogged was stripped of his clothes, and his hands were tied to a post above his head. He was then whipped across the shoulders, back, buttocks, thighs, and legs. The soldier standing behind him and one to the side of the victim. The whip used, the flagellum, was designed to make a devastating punishment, bringing the victim close to death. Several short, heavy leather thongs with 2 small balls of lead or iron attached to the end of each. Pieces of sheep's bone were sometimes included. As the scourging proceeds, the heavy leather thongs produce first superficial cuts, then deeper damage to underlying tissues. Bleeding becomes severe when not only the capillaries and veins are cut, but also arteries in the underlying muscles. The small meatballs first produce large, deep bruises, which are broken open by further blows. The fragments of sheep bones rip the flesh as the whip is drawn back. When the beating is finished, the skin of the back is in ribbons and the entire area torn and bleeding. Jesus refused to drink the wine and myrrh offered to him before the nails were driven in. It would have dulled the pain. Thrown down on his back with arms outstretched along the crossbar, nails were driven through Jesus' wrists into the wood. These iron spikes, about 6 inches long and 3/8 of an inch thick, cut the large sensor motor median nerve, causing excruciating pain in both arms. Carefully placed between the bones and the ligaments, they were able to bear the full weight of the crucified man. And in preparation for nailing of the feet, Jesus was lifted up and the crossbar fixed to the upright post. Then, with legs bent at the knee, the nail was driven through each ankle into the cross. Again, there was severe nerve damage and the pain caused was intense. It is important to note, however, that neither the wounds to the wrists or the feet caused substantial bleeding, since no major arteries were ruptured. The executioner took care to ensure this, so that death would be slower and suffering longer. Now nailed to his cross, the real horror of crucifixion began. When the wrists were nailed to the cross, the elbows were intentionally left in a bent position so that the crucified man would hang with his arms above his head, the weight being taken on the nails in the wrists. Obviously, this was unbearably painful, but it had another effect. It is very difficult to exhale in this position. In order to breathe out and then take in fresh air, it was necessary to push the body up on the nailed feet. When the pain from the feet became unbearable, the victim would again slump down to hang by the arms. A terrible cycle of pain began, hanging by the arms, unable to breathe, pushing up on the feet to inhale quickly before again slumping down, and on and on. This tortured activity became the more and more difficult as Jesus' back was scraped against the upright post, as muscle cramps set in because of the inadequate respiration. And as exhaustion grew more severe, Jesus suffered in this manner several hours before, with a final cry, he died. Cause of death? Many factors contributed to Jesus' death. A combination of shock and suffocation killed most victims of crucifixion. But in Jesus' case, acute heart failure may have been the final trauma. This is suggested by his sudden death following a loud cry only after a few hours. A quick death, it seems. Pilate was surprised to find Jesus already dead. A fatal cardiac arrhythmia or perhaps cardiac rupture are likely candidates.
Thank you for that analysis. Carol, got anything from up north?
No, not after that.
I understand. Okay,
I got
Arnie?
one if you guys would like to hear it. It's kind of appropriate for today.
You bet.
So the court sets an atheist holy day. In Florida, an atheist created a case against Easter and Passover holy days. He hired an attorney to bring a discrimination case against Christians and Jews in the observances of their holy days. The argument was that it was unfair that atheists had no such recognized days. The case was brought before a judge. After listening to the passionate presentation by the lawyer, the judge banged his gavel, declaring case dismissed. The lawyer immediately stood and objecting to the ruling, saying, "Your Honor, how can you possibly dismiss this case? The Christians have Christmas, Easter, and others. The Jews have Passover, Yom Kippur, and Hanukkah. Yet my client and all other atheists have no such holidays." The judge leaned forward in his chair saying, "But you do. Your client, counselor, is woefully ignorant." The lawyer said, "Your Honor, we are unaware of any special observances or holidays for atheists." The judge said, "The calendar says April 1st is April Fool's Day. Psalm 14:1 states, 'The fool says in his heart, there is no God.' Thus, it is the opinion of this court that if your client says there is no God, then he is a fool. Therefore, April 1st is his day. Court is adjourned.
True story?
Yeah, I guess.
That's good. Mr. Ramey,
All right.
you're up for devotions and lead us on.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start by going back a little bit in Mark to chapter 5, verses 22 and 24. And one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. The thing that kind of comes out of this is that Jesus went and did things that he didn't necessarily want to do or believe in, and he didn't necessarily understand them. And I can liken that to some of what we're going through right now as a society with the flu. And that the devastations caused by this COVID-19 flu have spared no individual, no community, no nation. Responses to the pandemic have included fear, anger, selfishness, and impatience, as well as generosity, kindness, and compassion. Some have acted rashly, taking risks that endanger the lives of others. Others have risked their own health to provide care for those who are sick and suffering. When synagogue leader Jairus reached out to Jesus in desperation, Jesus responded by simply going with him. Jesus calls us to make room in our hearts to be present with others and to assist our neighbors across the street and around the globe as God's transforming love works through our hearts and hands and voices. In line with that, I also found another article that was kind of interesting in that it defined 9 things that should not fall victim to the COVID flu compliance. There was a long explanation for each one of them. I'm going to read just the 9 items and you can apply them in your own instances. 1, relationships. 2, community. 3, gratitude. 4, empathy. 5, generosity. 6, education. 7, dreams. 8, forgiveness. 9, joy. Let us pray. Loving Jesus, bring healing and hope to our lives, to the church and to the world. Take away our fears and prejudices as you open our hearts to the needs of others. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Vic. Arnie, you ready to take us into the crucifixion and all that stuff?
Well, Ed, as he was reading the cause of Jesus' death, I would also have to add that you and I are the cause of Jesus' death. It was, Ed, that was a good, a physical description, but you and I are the cause of Jesus' death. And I was thinking, listen to the online service from Cross of Christ Sunday, and it was through the whole Lutheran community, but I think one of the last hymns was, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" And I was thinking that all of those who, in a sense, were standing around the cross, and was I there too? I think about Pontius Pilate. He wasn't actually at the cross, but he was involved in it, and he washed his hands. And I was thinking how many times have I washed my hands and avoided a certain responsibility, a certain connection, a certain obligation? Then I thought about Judas. He was there as well. Jesus chose him as one of his followers. And yet he sold Jesus out. And I was wondering, as I stood beneath the cross, what values have I sold out in my Christian life and in my Christian journey? I thought about Peter. He was there too. Oh yes, I will never deny you, Lord. I will never forsake you. I will never leave you. But I wonder how many times I have denied by my actions, by my words, by not affirming someone whom I should have affirmed. I think about the disciples. Jesus chose 12 people as his disciples, and for 3 years, these friends walked with him, listened to him, were blessed as he fed them and multitudes. They saw the healing that he did, and they listened to his teaching, but yet they fled. They ran away. They were in Jesus' close fellowship. And I wonder how many times I've taken off and left in my life. And I thought about the scoffers who were below the cross. There were many, well, come down from the cross. If he saved others, let him save himself. What have I done that has been doubtful, deeply doubtful, and derided him? I think about the priests who put piety over service. Who instead of going with their Jewish laws over love and care. And I wondered, think about the many issues that, and maybe it's been more in my background coming out of a more conservative church, but questions of abortion, questions of gay and straight, questions of closed communion, compassion. And I wondered how many times my piety this kind of piety overcame service and love and care for people who were different than me. I thought about the women who were there. Many of these women had traveled with Jesus and had cared for Jesus out of their means. They came down, many of them have Galilean names instead of Judean names, and they came from Galilee down to Judea to be with Jesus and to care for him. And I'm wondering how often I have failed to care for people in my life. And so, and then I think of Simon of Cyrene, who the soldiers forced to carry the cross. And we learned later that Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus. And it's probably an indication of the fact that doing that service changed something within him and he became a follower of Christ, probably not knowing of Christ before that time. And I wonder how many times I have failed to carry a burden for someone that may have made a deeper connection for that person. And so when I heard the song, the hymn, "Were You There When They Crucified My Lord?" Yeah, I was there. And the cause of his death was what I have done and what I have failed to do. But the cross is also there when a time when God draws close to me and says, "I forgive you," in spite of being a Pilate, a Judas, a Peter, a scoffer, a soldier, a priest, a criminal. Jesus still draws near to me and he embraces me with forgiveness and draws me close and then says, "Let's walk on down the road together again." And so those are just some thoughts about reflecting on that hymn at the end of the service Sunday. And I just wanted to also mention one other thing too, and it has nothing to do with this, but in yesterday's paper, there was an article about the comfort dogs. I don't know if you read that in the Denver Post. Redeemer Lutheran in Fort Collins has a group that trains comfort dogs. That these are dogs that they take into situations. They brought them down to Boulder to work to meet people and to give them comfort. And these dogs have been have been trained with 40 different commands, and they'll take them to the hospital and they'll ask the dog to raise his paw and put it on a person's hand or something like that, and make that connection where there's that comfort. And so I suppose that even God uses dogs at times to bring us comfort and walk with us on our way. But it was an example, and it mentioned a woman, Jody Lockwood, whom I've worked with in terms of Bright Stars of Bethlehem, and she now works with the comfort dogs up there. But it struck me as a way in which small acts of kindness come out of all of this. Even people like Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, in burying the body of Jesus, it was an act of kindness. But in all of this, it is God drawing close to me, even though I have often denied, turned my back, failed, sinned, yet Jesus still reaches down in love and offers everything he has, that I might have life and have forgiveness and live a chosen life. That ends the sermon. But that's, I just, Holy Week is a special time, and it's a time of reflection. And I know that the one thing I miss really is the gatherings during Holy Week. One thing I think that Judy and I as a family will be blessed, our youngest grandson will have his first communion at Cross of Christ Thursday. There's a 6:00 gathering in the parking lot, I guess, where the kids will receive their first communion. And so we'll be in our car and out for that. But it's those connections, I think, that are important. And as we remember that we walk together, through this time. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Yep. And I think we're most blessed because he was there and, gave himself for us. Why did Jesus go through all of this when he could have used his powers and escaped?
Because he knew his father is what his father wanted him to do this.
Last week I talked about how the Father must have felt listening to Jesus's prayers in Gethsemane, to have that cup pass by him and not have to go through that. And I think motivating me to ask that question or bring that up was feeling like the Father did something wrong. And how could a father let a child go through something like that? And as I said, I know I've said this more than once on these calls, that thing I like about this is listening to other people's perspectives, because it frequently makes me to rethink something or look at it from a different angle. And just out of the clear yesterday, I've been reading this book. You may all have it in your house because the women used it for one of their studies, but it's Footsteps of the Fisherman, and it's all about discipleship from the perspective of what Peter did in the Gospels and the Acts of the Apostles. But what came to me yesterday was, in a sense, the Father really had no choice, knowing all and knowing what mere mortal human beings would go through in their lives. Maybe none of us have gone through what Jesus went through, but from that time until now, Christians have gone through horrible things. And I think the Father's sense of justice was, if I'm going to put human beings through these types of trials, I've got to show that it can be done by a human being. And that's just, I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's just what came to me yesterday, that Father's sense of justice was that Jesus had to go through that.
Certainly, he did not avoid anything that would happen to his followers down the road. Many of his followers were, as you mentioned, Tom, were martyred. And just think about, as I'm assuming that most of you, or many of you, are parents. What's the toughest thing you had to do with your child, with one of your children, or with your children? What's the toughest decision that you had to make? And think of the think of the stress, the pain, the difficulty that may have caused in your heart. And it may have been something of discipline, maybe something of correcting him, maybe a medical issue. I don't know, whatever it could be, but think about what you would feel as a father when you had to face something like that, or think about what you would be feeling as a father if, and Tom suggested this, if you were the Heavenly Father and Jesus were your son, what would you be feeling? And I think of the history of the Christian church and the many times that there were the Christians were persecuted, and, who stood with their faith instead of surrendering it and paid the consequences of that. It's very easy for me and you, I think, to wash our hands and to walk away if things get tough. We live in a society, in a world, in a country that, gives us that freedom, that permission. But, and sometimes walking the path of Jesus is the toughest way to go. And, that's part of what we're saying here. Yeah, and I think you're right, Tom, is that the Father is knew what the followers of Jesus would have to face down the road, and so his own son faces that kind of persecution and difficulty as well.
I think we have a little, when we talk about the migrant situation at the border now and all the children coming there, and parents had released their children into danger, the hands of coyotes or whatever you want to call it, because of the situation in their hands, their lands. They're looking for the good of their children, but they're taking a one heck of a risk for the love of their child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be difficult. I'd feel very difficult, very stressed to be sending my child off like that. I know our daughter went off to study a semester in Cambridge in England, and just she was a mature kid, but still, sending her off like that was say, oh, oops, we pray that things go well, and knowing, and then after her semester there, she took off and hitchhiked around Europe for a couple months, and mom and dad often didn't know where she was, but just that, and then that was not kind of a persecution thing. It was just, but you know how you feel when your children step out, and when you're like the children at the border that Leroy mentioned, and so you can understand that, the Heavenly Father certainly had had feelings as well.
Having a child send off to in the military off to Afghanistan is a revelation time, Or think of the parents of those of you all that served in Vietnam or other conflicts, and how your parents felt with you going off.
And in my congregation in Littleton, one of our members was was part of the Denver police force, and he was killed. There was a standoff at somebody's house. There was some abuse going on, and the man came out of the house and shot. It was Jim Weir was the policeman's name, and and I think about again the officer in Boulder going into the King Soopers and stepping into a situation like that. You never know what's going to happen, and he sacrificed his life, and certainly his family is feeling the loss and the pain at this time. And again, I would mention this last time, it brings up all the issues for me of Columbine and what that was all about too. So Um, yeah, were you there when they crucified my Lord? I think we've all stood beneath the cross at different times, at different ways, with different feelings. And
Hey, Arnie, I was interested in your text of how you pulled this from different books, and actually the process of taking care of Jesus's body. I thought that was interesting. You know, and how'd you find out that these people, you know, Joseph of Arimathea owned a family tomb. They gave that goes to Pilate, asks for the body. Joseph buys large linen cloth. Nicodemus buys spices. I don't think I've ever seen that in the Bible. Is that all in different books?
oh yeah.
Okay.
First of all, usually what would happen at a crucifixion is they just leave the body on the cross, and the vultures would come, and there would be no burial. And so the very fact that Joseph and Nicodemus are working to bring Jesus' body down from the cross and put it in a tomb shows a deep respect. In Mark 15, Joseph goes, the word is boldly, to Pilate and asks for the body of Jesus. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead, so he summoned the centurion to check it out. And then in Mark 15, he orders that the body be given to Joseph. And the Sanhedrin would have disagreed with this, but they were busy getting ready for Sabbath rituals. And so Joseph consults with Nicodemus, and there's no time to wash the body or to anoint it. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. But Joseph runs off and buys a large linen cloth. That's also in Mark 15. Joseph takes down the body of Jesus, and he's accompanied by Nicodemus, as we read in John 19. And then they go, and the women also are there. The women who had come from Galilee with Jesus followed Joseph. They saw the tomb and how the body was laid in it, and they go home and prepare spices and perfumes. And that's in Luke 23. And they had to get this all done before the sun was setting, because when the sun set, that meant the Sabbath day would begin. And they were still deeply in their Jewish traditions that all work had to stop as the Sabbath day began. And so Joseph and Nicodemus, Joseph wraps the body in a clean linen cloth. It's in Matthew 27, and he places the body, Jesus' body, in his own new tomb. And the two of them, Joseph and Nicodemus, wrap Jesus' body in strips of linen with spices in accordance with Jewish burial customs. That's in John 19. And they bury him in a nearby tomb in which no one has ever been laid. And that probably suggests that that was Joseph's tomb. And the fact that they had a tomb carved out of the stone probably suggests that Joseph was pretty wealthy. And then Joseph rolls the stone in front of the entrance. That's in Matthew 27 and Mark 15. And Mary and the other Mary sit opposite the tomb, and the other women return to their homes. And the sun is setting, and so they roll the stone in front of the entrance. Joseph and Nicodemus do, and all work had to be finished by 6 p.m. when the sun set. And then the women rest on the Sabbath in obedience with the commandment. That's in Luke 23. So all these details are within the Gospels, and it just shows that Joseph and Nicodemus had great respect for Jesus. Wanted what would happen is, if anything, if the Romans took the body down, it would be tossed into a common criminal grave. And this way, the fact that Joseph puts Jesus' body in a separate tomb, in his tomb, shows that he has a deep respect. And the fact that he even goes to Pilate shows that he's stepping out of being real careful and putting himself out there in the service of Jesus and care. And then when the Sabbath begins at sundown, Joseph and Nicodemus return to their homes. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the other Mary, the wife of Cleopas, were sitting there, and it was too late for them to return to Bethany, which was at least an hour's walk away. And so they go to Mary's home in Jerusalem, and they're probably thinking to themselves, what does all this mean? And what does, what is happening? Was Jesus really under God's curse, having died on a tree, as Deuteronomy 27 says? What does all this mean? Where indeed was the God that Jesus spoke of? And so I would think that there were nothing but questions going on, a deep sorrow for these people for whom Jesus was a dear friend. And so it was, and then what happened was that the religious leaders wanted to make sure that this Galilean rabbi was dead, but the strange events of dark skies, earth tremors, what would happen if somebody came and stole Jesus' body and said that he had risen like he said he would. So what they do is they go to Pilate and say, would you put a guard there? And so Pilate, in a response, his response was a political interest. And so he puts a Roman guard in front of the tomb so that it would be secure, and that the disciples could not come and steal the body and say, yeah, Jesus rose from the dead.
Hey, Arnie, I
Yeah.
got two questions. Did Joseph of Arimathea have any kind of position or relationship with Pilate? I mean, why would Pilate release the body based on his request?
Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin. And in fact, even during the discussion about Jesus, he was one who had raised the issue of whether Jesus was really guilty. So he was a man of influence, and he was a man in the community who could go to Herod and say, he probably had some social contacts with him, through the years. And then so he would go there and ask that the body be given to him, and back instead of being taken care of by the Romans. Yeah.
Okay, second question. Joseph, his earthly father, is never mentioned that I see here. His mother is. Is there any relationship there?
No, after Joseph disappears, his earthly father disappears from the Gospels. I mean, he's in the Christmas stories. He's there when Jesus was age 12. Remember, Mary and Joseph went down from Nazareth down to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover when Jesus was 12. And they started home. They thought Jesus was with the crowd, and he wasn't. Where was Jesus? So they, you know, he was a precocious kid, I guess, because they went back and they found after 3 days, they found him in the temple arguing with the scribes and the Pharisees. And that is the last that we hear of Joseph. And Jesus is called the carpenter's son. The Greek word for carpenter that's translated carpenter is tekton. And tekton can mean a one who works with his hands. And right north of Nazareth, where they lived, was the town of Sepphoris. And there was a lot of stone work being done there in the city of Sepphoris in terms of construction of buildings and monuments and that. And some scholars think that Jesus and his father would walk the 4 miles from Nazareth to Sepphoris every day to go to work, and that Jesus may have been a stone mason rather than a carpenter, because in his parables, in Jesus' parables, he uses stones more than he uses wood or carpentry thing. So, but no, we do not hear anything more of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and so I would suspect that he probably had died, probably before Jesus began his ministry, and I think we would have heard, something about that. But Joseph just kind of vanishes out of the scriptures, and we hear no more of him. And Jesus makes no reference to him, and the Gospels talk about Mary, Jesus's mother. And then, of course, on the cross, Jesus sees his mother standing down there and his beloved disciple, John, and he says, Mary, here's your son, and to John, here's your mother. And so obviously Joseph was not alive at that point, and Jesus committed his mother to John's care. And
did Jesus' brother John write 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John?
it wasn't Jesus's brother, it was his cousin.
It was his cousin, so it wasn't his brother. I guess some point I had heard that John was Jesus' brother.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to figure out some of the authors of some of the letters like that, But no, it would have. John, the beloved disciple, was a cousin of Jesus, and he may have been the one who wrote the Gospel of John, or he may have been, one who did the letters. It's difficult to say. There's different opinions on that in terms as we go along. And
because the reason for my question was that if the John who wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John was Jesus' brother, how could we be so certain that it was the disciple John that Jesus said, here's your mother, take care of your mother? But you don't think that it was John's brother was involved at all, or Jesus' brother was involved in any of it?
I've never heard that his brother, his brother was, but because my understanding is that the John the disciple, the beloved disciple, is his cousin, and that he was probably the author of the Gospel of John. And again, there's different opinions on that as we go along.
No, I understand that John was the author of the Gospel, but I had heard that Jesus' brother wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and that's why I was raising the question of whether, if that was true, whether it could have been that John, his brother, that Jesus referred to from the cross.
I would not think so. I mean, I'd have to take a look at that a little bit more deeply and see, what it was. And So anyway, you know, it's as far as today's lesson goes, we get to the point where the body Jesus has died, he's buried, the guard is set at the tomb, and
Just, I don't want to go back, just a little more about his father, Joseph, probably being dead. I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption because of also the story about the wedding at Cana. It appeared that Mary went by herself. And I read somewhere that at that point, Mary may have been a woman of some influence just because of the way they asked her about being out of wine and her telling them to do what Jesus says. As you had mentioned several times, women didn't have much standing in that community, and yet she must have had some standing. It came to her with the idea that they were out of wine, and they listened to her when she said, you know, follow Jesus's directions.
yeah, yeah, and you know, I think Jesus gave women in his group much more respect and power than the normal people did, because, for example, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Susanna and Joanna were all women who had come down from Galilee and who had followed Jesus. And we read a couple places in the gospel that these women provided for Jesus out of their means. In other words, Jesus was an itinerant rabbi who would go from in the small villages wherever you had 10 Jewish men, you could create a synagogue. Okay, and these small synagogues would not have their own rabbi. And so you have Jesus, one of these itinerant rabbis who would go from village to village, you know, and on the Sabbath day, enter the synagogue and be invited to teach. And so Jesus, you know, during his 33 years of ministry, was not there building wooden chairs or wooden furniture or chopping away at stones, building monuments. So who would provide for his daily bread? I guess he could have snapped his fingers and a loaf of bread would appear. But what we read is that these women, this group of women from Galilee, must have been part of his followers, and they must have been a number of them must have been women of means. And the Gospels say in a couple of places that they provided for Jesus out of his means. And that probably included the disciples too, although the disciples probably took off some time and went fishing and sold the fish they caught, you know, for a few bucks in the marketplace, you know, to keep them going over the times as well.
This is a little off the subject, but since there was so much emphasis on not working on the Sabbath, it just brought a question to my mind. What would happen, and I don't know if they actually had hospitals there, but if a doctor was working on somebody and sundown came, would he just stop working on somebody and just let them die? Or that this kind of just popped in my head as you were explaining that, and the emphasis on getting things done before sundown.
Well, that's why you also had the day of preparation. The day before the Sabbath was the day of preparation, where you spent your time, you know, getting everything ready. And in terms of doctors, I would imagine that even in the Jewish faith, that compassion would override religious rules. And I think that's what we remember too, is that, you know, I was during Holy Week, I like to reread the Gospels, and I was reading Matthew yesterday, And there are just many places, what Jesus does is he simply does an act of mercy contrary to the Jewish regulations. In other words, compassion overtakes whatever kind of limitations we put on, connections and religion that way. And it's the compassion and love and forgiveness is what rules in Jesus' heart. And that's when, as we, were you there when they crucified my Lord? Yes, I was there, a sinner, and but his love overrules my sin and brings forgiveness. And even the rules that I set up as a religion person, whether it's Jewish or Lutheran or whatever, love and compassion overrules and infuses them and becomes the motivation for my actions and what I do. And so when I wash my hands, when I betray Jesus, when I deny him, when I flee, when I scoff, no matter how cruel I am, if I put my piety over service, in the face of all of this, Jesus still draws near as God's love to me, and draws me into God's care and forgiveness.
And to further answer Ed's question, in one situation where they were questioning Jesus doing something on the Sabbath, didn't he say, if your donkey fell into a well, wouldn't you pull him out? So obviously they were doing work on the Sabbath if it was required.
Yeah. And as you read, even St. Paul's epistles, there often, he's struggling with communities that are, fighting with each other over religious issues, and he keeps saying time, it's forgiveness and it's love that rules and undergirds, what you're doing and overrides some of these rules that you come up with. And
So Arnie, we are about 2 minutes from stopping. Do you have any closing comments on this section?
Again, I would simply say that hymn at the end of Sunday service, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" has stuck with me, and made me take a look at where I am and what I've been doing and what I have not been doing, and being deeply a reminder that even though I am the cause of Jesus' death, yet his death is the cause of God's love for me, and comes around the other way. Amen.
Go in peace, serve the Lord, right?
Peace to the Lord.
Steve and I have sung that every Good Friday, that song, so it sticks with you. Yeah,
It does.
thanks, Arnie. I'm also going to ask. So the rest of Mark now is the resurrection. Are we going to do that next week?
Yeah.
Okay. And then so we probably ought to think of what's next after that. Do you want to give some thought to it? Do you want to ask some questions? So give us some of your thoughts of how we go next.
Well, I guess I would ask the group, what would you like to study?
So we'll tell you what, I'll include that in the next week's message.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do a check-in. Vic, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, we're doing good. Actually going to be able to get our family together for Easter Sunday, so we're really looking forward to that. And then I'd also like to just bring to everybody's attention that this past week we lost Ken Miller. I think, everybody at Cross of Christ knows who he was because they came over from Hope and then they'd go back and forth and we used to see him, and his death was rather sudden, and I guess the family didn't really understand what happened. So I think we need to pray for that family.
Okay. Enjoy your Easter with the family. Grover.
Doing well. Situation normal, other than seeing I've got a little shoveling to do when we're done here.
Ah. You got a little more snow than we did. And Dennis Newton?
Yeah, Kathy had both her eye surgeries, and it's been 3 weeks on one week on the other. She thinks she's disappointed that she can't see distance quite as well as she did before she had the surgery, but I've heard that it takes 6 to 8 weeks to really have it come around. So we're in the wait to see how it goes. Other than that, the surgery went all right. I enjoyed last Sunday's virtual service with all the different churches, but I got to tell you, I'm having trouble with virtual church services ringing my bell. And this Easter, we're going to go to an in-service church service at another church because I need that. I need that closeness of real people. But anyway, happy Easter to all you guys.
Yep. Now, did Kathy get the bifocal lenses inserted?
No, but I don't think so. She did the laser surgery, and they just set her a new lens in. They said they thought it'd be better. She can read a little better up close without glasses. She can do that, but the distance vision is just not quite as clear as she thought it should be. So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Sorry, I thought she was getting new lenses with the cataracts. Yeah.
Well, they stuck something in there. I don't know what they did. They put a lens in. I don't know what that's all about, but yeah, they stuck some kind of lenses in there, but I don't know if they're bifocal.
Okay. We'll check on that next week.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dennis. Good to see you back. Bob Peters?
Things are going okay here. Nothing new to report, basically. Minor sicknesses off and on, but other than that, we're in good shape. 2 invites for Easter, so we got to decide which side of the family to go to. Other than that, we're in good shape.
Sounds good. Dale?
Going good here. I was very impressed this week how some nice weather has brought people out. There's at some points during the week when we had nice weather, it was like it was almost reunion as people were out walking that I hadn't seen for months. So that made it a fun week. So I like that.
That's good. Okay. Arnie?
The need for in-person worship is very, very much part of what I need to. The online, it connects in some way, but it does not connect like the real one. So we're hoping also be able to get together with our kids this Easter. And again, like I mentioned, we rejoice that our youngest grandson is getting his first communion at this Thursday at Cross of Christ.
Is he in 3rd grade?
4th grade.
4th grade? Okay. I think our granddaughter is getting first communion as well. So we'll be checking. Maybe we'll see you there.
Okay.
Nev?
Yep, doing well here, no problems. And we're going to have Easter dinner with our son in Longmont.
That's great. Tom Littleton?
Doing pretty good, thank you. Got to see our 2 granddaughters and our daughter for the first time in over a year on Sunday. And we are planning to all get together for Easter dinner. So we're excited about that. But I echo the same thing about the virtual services not quite being the same. At first, it just is going on too long.
It's hanging in there, isn't it? Okay. Well, blessings to you and Gail.
Thank you.
So for us, yeah, our kids down in Colorado Springs are actually coming up, and so we are having both of our boys and families together. And I'm headed out to buy a honey baked ham about noon today. So the farmers, my brother needs you to buy ham. Very good. We're doing okay. Ed?
Yeah, we're doing great. And believe me, the committee to try to get us back into church is really pressing to get it done sooner than later. The big key is to get the staff vaccinated before that can happen. So, you know, that's the number one thing we have to get done. So, but we are trying very hard to get it back quickly. So know that it's being worked on.
Thanks for representing our opinions and feelings there, Ed. Bill Peterson.
Yes, sir. Things are going good. I was just going to tell Dennis, you know, if they wanted you to know all that stuff, they would have told you. So I guess they probably didn't want you to know about all that eye stuff. Things are going good here.
Very good. You take care.
You
Steve,
too.
We're doing well. Went for a 32-mile bike ride yesterday and snow today. And my brother from Missouri texted me and said, when is winter over there? And my response was June. So I think the year before I left to go back to Illinois for those 4 years, I was principal at Fremont, and I remember the last day of school. It may have been towards the end of May, or it might have even been the first part of June. We actually had snow, didn't accumulate, but I said springtime in the Rockies. That's just the way it is.
Boy, isn't that true? Yeah. Gary, how you doing in Florida? Boy, that's real direct. Carol?
I'm doing all right. No plans for Easter. I'll probably be here by myself, but I just want to remind you, Rob, you are what you eat, so. Talking about the ham.
Hey, it's better than breakfast.
Could be Ludapest.
No way. Okay. Leroy.
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, Dave?
Doing well. We had our grandson over Sunday for the afternoon and really enjoyed that. So things are going well.
Excellent. Okay, I'm good. So next week, April 4th already. Dave, you've got devotions. And then Grover, you're on deck for the 13th. Okay. Arnie, I'm going to ask you to lead us in the Lord's Prayer, please.
Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you very much. And I believe on Good Friday, isn't it, Steve, that our car choir will be focused on the virtual service. So you'll get to see what we all look like sitting in our cars, singing, and trying to hold a camera in front of our face. And by the way, you will see me with my music like this. So have a blessed week, everybody.
I hope most of us didn't gain 29 pounds over this last year.
Eat up, eat ham, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay. Take care, everybody. It's good. It's always good to see you.
Thanks, guys.
Rob, you can send me the video again to convert to YouTube if you want.
Thank you. That works really well.
Okay.
Appreciate it, Gary.